experiences of a child are very significant. And in any case, they would have long-lasting implications. So positive experiences promote positive later experiences in the child. Negative experience then have negative effects or impact on the child. So a home in which the child grows or an institution in which the child is raised would have implications. A problematic home is likely to disrupt the brain stress response system for the child and therefore reduce the quality of caregiving and interfere with healthy development. We talk about the stimulating environment, so a non-stimulating environment but also an insecure environment would lead to negative outcomes in the later years. Research has linked negative home environments during children's first 3 years, as has been discussed here, with challenges later in their lives. For example, poor language development, behavior problems, deficits in schools, regression, anxiety, and impaired cognitive development. I'm linking this to resilience. And so what is resilience? In simpler words, the ability to bounce back to life. But basically, the capacity of a system, and a system we are talking that within a child, it's a whole system that actually we are trying to influence and impact, to adapt successfully to the disturbances that threaten its stability, viability, or development. And so, why is it important for me to look at the aspect of the environment vis-a-vis resilience? Because when the environment is disrupted, then we interfere with the resilience of the child and therefore affecting their overall outcomes. And we're looking at the three factors in that sense. This was a study done in 11 institutions of care for children, and there were about 180 children who participated in this between 6 to 13. You may wonder why. It was to test because these were mostly children neglected, abandoned, and had other challenges. How did that impact their later outcomes? We used a tool, Child and Youth Resilience Measure, version 26. At the children version, there are different versions of the same, which we used, and then we had the key informant interviews to be able to gather some data from the caregivers of these children. 3 objectives, and I'll not go through that again because of our time. Responses to that. First, when through the key informant interviews, we established that these children had experienced some adversities in their early experiences of life, and that included abuse and neglect, poverty, abandonment, and criminal offense, because one of the homes we went to was a rehabilitation center. But our next objective was, what is the resilience measure, or how resilient are these child? Because abuse would then determine they are not resilient enough, or intervention has taken place and has enhanced their resilience to be able to cope. So we assessed resilience on 3 levels because that's what helps the survival of the child. The individual capacity of the child, the caregiving, or in other words, the family support to the child, and then thirdly, the community, or what we call the context in which the child grows in. Under the individual factors, we had 3 levels of the child. That is their personality as an individual, their peer support, people around them, and then finally, the social skills. How are they able to interact? Caregiving, it was at 2 levels, and that is the physical, in terms of the food, the shelter, and the clothing, and then there was the psychological. How do the caregivers support these children's emotional well-being? And then finally was context. And in the context, we are looking at issues of education and issues of spirituality. And so we look at the holistic dimension of the child. Now from our results, we established that actually caregiving scored highest at 63.0% in terms of the resilient measure. And that meant that actually within the caregiving setup, there was a lot of support, and these children felt their caregivers were able to support them. But you can see personal or the individual factors derailed the child a little more at 50%. That means it's possibility that in their earlier years, the abuse had made them reduce their ability to be able to be self-confident and even be able to cope as far as their personality is concerned. I left a lot of statistics out, and so I'll just be picking up quickly my narrative. In the findings of this work, which it was very clear that there was a level of resilience for the institutionalized children, but it was evident there were impacts in their lives, especially at their individual capacity to cope and self-regulate. There were high scores of the caregiver, but on the physical support, food, clothing, and shelter. However, there was a lower score on the psychological, because when the children were asked, would you go to talk to your caregiver when you are in trouble? And majority said no, which then explains a lot of struggle, maybe in terms of coping. Contextual education scored higher because they said they're interested in schooling and education. But it was very clear they enjoyed their religious activities and participating in that. And actually studies have shown that there is a level of support in the spiritual aspect and development of the child that helps in their coping. I think I've mentioned about this. So it may mean that most of these children who are institutionalized, their connection with the family in terms of the psychological was weak. And for those who've done attachment, it means their attachment had weakened with their caregivers, and therefore the lack of trust and the lack of confidence in checking on them. We then find really a mixed feeling from the children in that although their family provided for their physical needs, they were not confident to be able to share with them their problems. Again, I said, probably because of the institutionalization, the break from the home of origin, and then eventually with this institutionalized care, where there is a consistent change of caregivers, then there was a problem with the attachment and therefore helping them to cope and self-regulate. Protective factors. We established that in this, again, the three levels, individual, caregiver, and then context. Caregiver, again, scored higher. And what does this mean to us? That a child may be exposed to a negative environment, but if later in life they find better support of the caregiver and also the context, the environment in which they are growing in, it's possible to help them to recover and be able to bounce back to life and able to move on. Contextual factors, as mentioned already, were a really contributing factor education, and that means the teachers and the support system seemed to have impacted these children, and it was sort of their level of hope to be able to move on in life. Individual factors really were lower, and there was a need to help children to be able to move on. So in conclusion, we see that these children within the Dagoretti and Lower Kabete counties were generally resilient, but with some areas requiring support, especially the psychological support. What's our recommendation? It's important to offer a holistic nurture, spiritual, social, emotional, physical, so that this, and cognitive, that this child is able to enjoy a whole wealth of support and survive well. They need to be protected from abuse in early years to avoid any negative outcomes in later years. And then I think finally, number 5, physical caregiving is not sufficient in itself. However, caregivers should be in a position to offer psychological plus psychosocial support to children to be able to cope. And so, life is not about how well or how fast you can run or how fast you climb, but how well you bounce back. Thank you.
Thank you, Roslyn, for that wonderful presentation and for reminding us the importance of caregivers. I think the research supports the nurturing care framework, the safety and protection, and the responsive caregiving. So we've spent about 8 minutes, so we'll go to the next presentation. Keep your questions. If you have any questions, just keep them, and then after that, after we have finished with the presentations, we will ask the questions. Our next presenter is Ruth, and just a small bio about Ruth. She's a research, she has research focus in early childhood development, and she has worked extensively in the research and implementation of projects in early childhood development with population in urban informal settlements. an advocate for development of policies and environments that foster quality care and development for young children. So we're talking about quality ECD services. Welcome.
Thank you. So I'd like us to think a little bit about any child that you've interacted with that has fascinated you or left an impression in your mind. Just think of any child. I'm sure each one of us here has met such a child who's left an impression. So that takes me to my presentation today. Well, I have done quite some research in urban informal settlements with a couple of organizations. And one of the organizations I've worked with over time has been the Kidogo program. And with working with them, we've used different tools to look at the quality of the kind of the program that they deliver to children, to young children. And in looking at quality, we've used measures that are scientifically developed, measures that have been developed by researchers, measures that have been used over time in industrialized countries. And one of the glaring things that has come out of, one of the glaring gaps, has been all these measures have a gap. And one of the glaring gaps has been the voice of parents. Parents being the main decision makers, the main people who meet the costs, the main people who are able to assess the child, over time after they transition from the early care when the kid goes to primary school. So you're going to watch a video that is going to tell you a little bit about what parents think. So this video is a component of a research study that sought to really listen to what parents think, to what their perspectives, to what their ideas are about quality care. So with the first opening line that I say, think of a child, look at the parents, look at the emotions, because I felt that the rawest form of documenting what parents think was to capture them, to capture the emotion as they say, this is what I consider to be quality. This is what I'm happy with when I see my child doing. So as you watch the video, I'd like you to reflect on that.
meeting is titled Parental Perception on the Quality of Early Caregiving Environment. And it focuses on a specific program, the Kidogo program, that has presence in 3 urban informal settlements, which include Kibera, Kandemi, and New Design. And more recently, they have also adopted Kawangware as one of their areas of operation through their model of operation that they dubbed the hub spoke model, which have the centers of excellence, which are the hubs, and the spokes would be daycare centers that are owned by different individuals, but they mentor those people to come to the quality of hubs. So for this specific study, I am focusing on the hub centers, which are the centers of excellence. So looking at Vera, Kandemi, and Design. This project is purely a qualitative study to really document the insights of the parents, to document their voices on what they think about 4 areas of the quality of the environment in which their children spend a lot of their time. So these children are children aged 0 to about 3 years who are in the baby care section. Looking at the physical environment, that would be the indoor environment, like the classroom area or the environment where they spend their time doing different activities. Then there's the outdoor environment where the children play and do different activities in the outdoors. And then I'm also looking at the caregivers or the people who stay with them for the day. So looking at their capacities and the abilities that they transfer to the children. I'm also looking at the curriculum or the way of doing things. So the curriculum that is implemented at Kidogo is largely play-based. So I'm looking at what parents think about that curriculum. So this effort was motivated by my experiences with research in different areas of Nairobi, with working in different urban informal settlements, looking at the daycare environments, the kind of impact they're having on children, the kind of immediate experiences that they're offering to the children. Now, in our context here in Kenya, we do not have minimum guidelines because under the mainstream education system, we do not cater for children 0 to 4 or 0 to 3 years. So there are really no guidelines that stipulate how daycare should be run. As a result, most of these daycare centers are run as businesses by the people who run them. There's also a gap in research where a lot of the measures, a lot of the instruments that have been developed, a lot of the reports that you will see about the quality of caregiving environments have been informed by experts or researchers. So there's a gap in the sense that we don't get to hear what parents think, we don't get to hear what parents value. And so I thought it would be very interesting or it would be very valuable to really capture what parents value, particularly with daycare centers that seem to be making that are impacting society in some ways and that continue to be highlighted as being of good quality or of being at a certain standard of quality. And one of these centers has been Kidogo.
Hapo wale ndani environment hapa na vile huwa watoto wanakuwa handled wakimbia hapo na vile wanachukuliwa na wale watu wanafunzi.
Enough play for a child because play is critical at that stage. So enough play and also learning. If you play,
and choose Kidogo because first the place concerning sanitation, the water there is a place where you leave your child, you know she's safe.
Nilikuwa nikipendelea sana mtoto wangu nipeleke mahali alelewa hapo atoke chini na ile msingi mzuri sana. Sasa nikawa nitafuta shule kama hiyo sana. Sasa mmoja ndio akaniambia usisumbukane, kuna shule mtoto wangu analelewa Na kweli sasa hiyo rafiki yangu mpaka tabia yake ilikuwa sana. Nilikuta sasa nikaingia kidete.
The child is able to do a lot compared to other kids at her age. Mostly she likes this play. She likes playing a lot with different materials at home. She loves songs.
Kuja nielewa kidogo, alikuwa hajui kuongea, hajui kutembea vizuri. Akiwa anacheza na mwingine alikuwa ni mtihani uchokozi, lakini saa hii nasikia kusema ticha niseme usitokoze mwenzako, tuombe mama, ticha alisema ukikula lazima uombe, ticha alisema ukikula lazima unawe mkono.
I think that has learned a lot. First of all, she's more courageous. Every day I can share something with her. She learns new songs. She can play, she can dance, she can interact with everyone else.
She don't always relax. Even before you were waiting, today is school. She knows how to take care of herself when she's even with others, even with us, she knows what she's doing.
Enyewe alikuwa anajua kwa sababu na vitu zingine hapa anajua, lakini sasa anajua anaweza kuambia mwalimu wangu anaitwa hivi, tumesoma hivi na tumeshinda hivi, na vile walikuwa wanacheza na mkono. Haikuwa kuna question vile mkuja environment hapa ameshinda na ile bidii sana, akisosha na mwingine, unajua hapa anazoea kukaa na mwingine pale, lakini hapa anafundisha kukaa na mwingine. Nianze kuwa kwa mkutano kwa siache ndio na wengine. Siache mtoto na jirani hata aeleweki, wache mtoto wako. Nijifunze jinsi ninasaidia watoto. Ninapokaa kwa nyumba, ninapokaa kwa nyumba, ninapoongea na mama ama na bwana. Nikiongea tukue sensitive sana kwa watoto. Juu watoto ile maneno inaendelea nyumbani wao wanapata shule. Sasa hapa nikajifunza kumbe nikiongea kitu kwa nyumba pia anaanza kujenga na kuelekea na mimi.
I'd say I've learned, and my child also learned. So maybe I've learned to be patient with children. To give them time, to also give them the ideas and listen to them, and treat them the same way they caregivers that treat them. So we have to reason with them. So whenever we talk, we listen to them. And you don't have to give a no answer all the time. Even if you know what the child is not right, you disagree but politely. But again, you explain why. So that they also understand. That is the same thing that is done there.
These trainings that are seen in the education at ministry, we enable us teachers to lead the kids to level the child protection policy that we should use cognitive listening to bring up the children, they don't have to leave them all the time, and also to the parents about it. Mimi kunanifurahisha kidogo sana. Hakuna mtu wa kidogo hata huyu anashangaa. Watoto wote wa kidogo wako active. Kama ni page kusoma anasoma, kama ni kizungu anakuambia teacher alisema hata kwa muda kuongea kizungu. Kwani mama wewe huwezi ongea kizungu?
I value the relationship you have with the child. The way they interact, the way they talk, they're friendly to the kids. They never shout at the kids. They talk to them like they reason with the kids.
Children's program, in as much as it's just learning, that kids are able to learn through play.
I want to really see what is this that parents value and hope that it will inform what centers and what even the government will consider giving to children, because the priorities of parents are really important, very, very important in terms of meeting the needs of children. Number two, my contribution to this I hope that on top of highlighting parents' voices, that I would be able, in a way, this study would be able to influence the measures that we apply in contexts such as urban informal settlements, that some of the items would be adapted to fit the context of urban informal settlements.
Well, I don't know what you had, but I'm sure you had a few things from the parents. I don't know the picture of the child that you have in your mind. If self-care, courage, confidence, and other issues like that parents spoke about with such big smiles. Like I didn't hear a parent really emphasize, I'm so happy my child is able to be number one or count this to that. While that is very important, it is important to emphasize these aspects that, I mean, we don't get to see them in any measures, but are really important for parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth, for that media presentation on the voices of the parents. I think we just want to continue on that conversation about Kidogo and what Kidogo is doing. Janet, are you here? Are you ready? As she comes, I just want to introduce Janet. She's the Director of Pedagogy and a founding member of Kidogo Innovations. And prior to joining the work, she worked with International Child Resource Institute as a national ECD coordinator. She has developed a unique play-based approach being used in improving the quality of learning for adults in both Kidogo programs and their partners. Janet has both a BA and a Master's in Early Childhood Studies from Kenyatta University. So Janet, welcome. How much time? We are less than?
A few minutes.
Let's try to do 7 minutes.
Thank you. As she's already said, once again, my name is Janet Mitiki. Kidogo, yes. I hope everyone is able to see. Imagine working in a childcare center for the first time from a high-income area, and now you're going to the slums for the first time. And the story you hear is chop the neck, move forward. Hata shingo, songa mbele. Then you get scared. Are you in the right place? Funny enough, the teachers are just looking at this child, Brian Ochieng. And then he said, why are you not helping Brian to stop talking, please? And they say, those are the words he had from his parents when they were being attacked during the post-election violence. So how do we help Brian? The story is, we are used to that, Janet. It is not the first time. So we have no other way but we just hear Brian talk that way every day, and we get used and he goes home in the evening. This is a photo that was taken like 2018, during the post-election violence that I know we are all aware about. And my topic is on integrating child protection into the ECD programs. I've talked to so many people and I hear them talk about child protection, safeguarding children's rights. But how do we bring it into the component like we talk about nurturing care framework? It has 5 components. How do we integrate it as early as we said, early before conception? How can we help our caregivers in the ECD centers to understand this is part of our learning like every day? How do we empower our young children, our small children, and particularly working in the informal settlements with the very basic information on how the caregiver can identify, and after identification, what would be the best way to give the child the basic information in case something happens? How can the child protect himself or herself? Looking at some data that we got like for 10 years for Childline Kenya, I know most of you are aware about Childline Kenya. We were looking at different kinds of abuse. And it was so funny to see this kind of a data. Like this morning, Leonard was saying, as we are here, so many children are being born all over the country. And in the same way, abuse is taking place, like we are sitting here in so many places in a very high demand. So this is a report that we got in 2016 from Childline, and we got the percentage like this. With neglect, it was 41%. 1 out of 2 children among below 5 years was being abused. 23%, that is 1 out of 10, among children of 0 to 5, that is the age we are working with, were being abused. So one of the biggest things that we got, it was any time neglect went high, all the other forms of abuse were going high. Because if the child misses food and all the basic needs, all the other forms of abuse automatically happened. So neglect was around 13,878, and that is a gap of like 10 years. Sexual abuse, like 7,732, that's 7,832. Physical abuse, where some of us are used like caning, corporal punishment, it's very normal in our society. And we found it like in the informal settlements, it's like, ni kawaida. Huwezi kaa na mtoto ukose kuchapa, ni kawaida. So that is the kind of a thing we also get from both the caregivers and also the parents. Child labor, it was 3,125. Emotional abuse, 1,025. Child trafficking and abduction, 528. Remember, this is the age bracket we are currently all of us sitting here to discuss about. So it is not from any other bracket. So what is the relationship between child abuse and ECD? We are all talking about the nurturing care framework. We cannot talk about holistic development without putting away safeguarding the children's rights. We cannot talk about having a holistic child if we are not safeguarding the rights. Health and nutrition is a component in the nurturing care framework. How do we advocate for this? How do we empower the caregivers to understand it is very important as a right for the child to be given the nutritious and balanced diet on a daily basis, even the teachers and the parents also at home. Caregivers, how do we give them, like, knowing ECD is not a standalone? We cannot talk about holistic development without that. And also early learning. Early learning doesn't just start when the child comes to school. It starts from the caregiver, starting from the womb, and that kind of a process. So that is the relationship. Responsive caregiving and stimulation, for us to be able to work on that. Health and nutrition perspective, child protection, and early learning. So, we as Kidogo, what are our intervention ways? What are we intervening in the community? We talked about creating child-friendly environments. How do we incorporate child protection when we are designing environments for learning in our child care centers? How do we ensure that the children's rights are also kind of discussed, or we consider how the learning environment is friendly, how we consider the materials the children are using, and so forth. Play-based approach. How do children use play-based approach and make sure that their rights are put into the considerations as they use these materials? How do we localize? We've localized our training content to fit into the context of the local community we are talking about. You cannot tell somebody about this is an abuse or determine there's an abuse until the community buys and they stay together. We also agree this is an abuse to us. So we've localized it in a way because we are working with mamapreneurs or women, business women, so that they can be able to understand very simplified way on how they can identify abuse in a very simplified way. We're also integrating health and nutrition because it's part of the components and it's part of meeting the needs, the basic needs of the child and protection. Then we have also created a community of practice using the CHPs, the village elders and the administration leaders who are able to help us when it comes to issues of whistleblowing. Where can the caregiver go to and make sure that she is also protected? And in case an abuse comes to the child care center, how can the teacher be able to articulate it without fear because she's being protected also by the legal administration around? Then we also have the system of easy text messages, like telling the parents, if you see these signs in your child, it should be a concern to you. If you see such a characteristic in your child, you can send a text message and ask for an assistance or say this kind of a thing is happening. So what is happening on the ground, the grassroots? We are training both the caregivers and school leaders through clusters where we bring them together and we are able to train them on the importance of how they can be able to integrate child protection in their ECD program. We are also engaging the CHBs and the local administration. We feel like there is no way we can work in the ground without
bringing in these people on board, and then they buy the idea because they would look at it like it's very normal. We want to eliminate the aspect of saying it is normal because it is not normal. And until we change the attitude, people will still have the perception it's normal. This is a group of caregivers, directors who are owning their child care centers in the Kiambu slums of Nairobi, and they've been going through the trainings and buying the idea of it is important for us to incorporate child protection. They see the need of incorporating it. What are the achievements and results? People have been able to work together and say, yes, it's true, this is not normal. These are children who are kind of, those who are hearing like Brian, Kata Shingo Songa Mbele. That's not a language of existence. There has been communication and collaboration amongst children of different communities in Kenya. And you can see now children are able to make their own projects together and so forth. So those are some of the achievements that we have gotten. Holistic, the lessons learned is child protection is not a stand-alone. We cannot talk about stand-alone. Child protection is a stand-alone. We will think about how can we incorporate our child protection in the holistic environments of the child, strengthening partnership with people who are already talking about child protection, like UNICEF, World Vision, Mtoto News, and other people who are all talking about child protection. How can we partner with them and be able to know how we can be able to protect our children? We need clear systems and structures. Evidently, you've seen the cases for a 10 years duration from child line. That means there is a gap because sometimes people may call, no one is there to receive, the call may not be received. So what happens? The abuse is still ongoing because the call has not been picked and maybe there is no capacity to accommodate those kind of calls at a particular time. And remember, it's also a free line, 116, so everybody all over is calling and all these services are happening. So what happens? The child is still going through that abuse until something is taken care of. And responsive caregivers. If our caregivers also have no idea about child abuse and they don't take it positively, there is no way they can say, we are going to protect the children. So before we protect the children, we also need to put into consideration that our caregivers, our teachers in the ECD centers need to be protected so that as they go on with the mental health and the responsiveness, they can be able to protect the children that they care. And the ECD programs. Those are just kind of resources on what the information has been going from. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. You've done well. 9 minutes and 30 seconds. But thank you for reminding us that the psychosocial and the child needs to grow in love, well protected, hearing the kind words, and not to be abused. And I know that's a topic we can discuss for many hours. Our next presenter is Michael. If you get help, let me just introduce who Michael is. Michael has campaigned, Michael Simpson has campaigned for children's rights for over a decade. He specializes in early years education and child protection across both international and UK domestic policy projects. Is Gilbert here? Gatia. Okay, he's going to present with Gatia, and is a child protection specialist with a vast experience on policy and advocacy matters, focusing more in Kenya and the region. So, just as our program is indicating, that we're going to talk about leaving the youngest behind. So it would be interesting to hear the presentation, and especially with